Welcome to this explainer. If you're a runner, a cyclist, or a triathlete, you already know that balancing your training load with your recovery is basically the absolute holy grail of progress. Get it right and you literally fly. Get it wrong, you hit a massive wall. So today, we're turning this into a highly practical tutorial on how to transition away from just training by feel and instead use objective biological data to optimize your endurance performance. We're going to dive into the exact science of heart rate variability so you can stop guessing and finally get that undeniable edge.
So think about this for a second. Are you actually recovered right now, or are you just used to the fatigue? It's a tough question, right? Endurance sports generate immense cumulative fatigue, which makes it incredibly hard to know when your body is truly ready to push hard. We've all been there. Sometimes you wake up feeling super heavy and sluggish, but you get out there and actually have this fantastic, record-breaking workout. Other times, you wake up highly motivated, your mind is completely ready to go, but the second you start pushing, your legs feel like lead, and your physiological engine is just completely tapped out. So how exactly do we bridge that gap between what our mind feels and what our biology is actually doing?
Well, here is our roadmap for today's explainer to figure that out. We'll start with the endurance training trap, then decode the science of heart rate variability, cover the strict daily protocol for measuring it, learn the simple traffic light system for daily decisions, and finally, look at how to adjust your training to avoid common pitfalls. All right, let's kick things off with section 1, the endurance training trap, and the very real limits of training by feel. You know the trap I'm talking about, right? Relying purely on your subjective feelings or stubbornly sticking to a rigid fixed-load training spreadsheet often leads directly to overtraining and injury. When we train strictly by volume, just looking at the calendar and trying to log more and more miles because a generic plan told us to, we are completely blind to what our internal systems are actually experiencing underneath the surface. And without objective data, you are literally flying blind to the early signs of systemic stress. Think about how many inputs your body is dealing with on any given day. Your body doesn't actually differentiate between the intense physical stress of a marathon prep block and the heavy psychological stress of a brutal work week, a sudden lack of sleep, or traveling across time zones. To your central nervous system, stress is simply stress, and it all accumulates in the exact same bucket. If you only rely on a spreadsheet, you might schedule a brutal high-intensity interval session on the exact day your body's bucket is overflowing. In doing that, it vastly increases your injury risk and entirely halts your fitness gains. Which brings us perfectly to section 2, decoding heart rate variability, or the science of the space between your heartbeats. There is a really counterintuitive nature to the human heart. Even if your resting heart rate is exactly 60 beats per minute, the intervals between those beats aren't exactly 1 second each. Your heart isn't a perfect metronome. One gap might be 0.98 seconds, the next might be 1.02 seconds, and the next 0.97 seconds. That tiny micro variation in time from beat to beat, that is your heart rate variability. And contrary to what you might naturally assume, a heart that beats like a perfect, rigid, ticking clock is actually a sign of severe stress and exhaustion. A healthy, recovered, adaptable cardiovascular system has a highly variable rhythm. You want high variability. To understand exactly why that variability is a good thing, think of your autonomic nervous system like a seesaw balancing two opposing sides. On one side, the sympathetic system acts as your internal gas pedal. It drives activation, that fight or flight response, and stress. On the other side, the parasympathetic system is your internal brake. It drives recovery, the rest and digest response, and adaptation. When you are well rested, the parasympathetic system is highly active. It's constantly applying and releasing the brake over and over, responding to tiny changes in your environment. And that constant adjustment is exactly what creates that beautiful variation in timing between your heartbeats. So your HRV is the ultimate indicator of which side of the seesaw is currently winning. High HRV, your brake is active, you're recovered. Low HRV, the gas pedal is stuck down and you are stressed and fatigued. So how do we actually capture this? Let's move to section 3, how to measure HRV and the daily protocol for reliable data. Okay, these 4 rules, they are absolutely non-negotiable. Whether you use a compatible chest strap, a dedicated smartphone app, or a modern sports watch, the measurement environment must be strictly controlled. You need to measure it the exact moment you wake up. You need to do it while still lying supine in bed. You absolutely must take the reading before the stimulant effect of your morning coffee hits your system, and even before the orthostatic stress of simply standing up alters your heart rhythm. This intense consistency is the only way to ensure you're capturing your true, uncontaminated baseline before the chaos of the day begins. But here is the catch. You can't make training decisions on day 1. HRV is an incredibly individual metric. A score of 50 milliseconds might be exceptionally high for one athlete, meaning they're in peak condition, but that exact same 50 could be incredibly low for you, signaling severe fatigue. You need to gather 4 to 6 weeks of daily morning data to establish what normal looks like for your unique biology. Only after you've built that personalized baseline does the data actually become actionable. Once you've got that baseline dialed in, we hit section 4, the traffic light system. This is where we turn that data into daily action. This translates into a super practical framework used by platforms like the Oura app. It takes all the deep complexity of your nervous system and boils it down into 3 remarkably clear actions. If your morning HRV reading is at or above your personal baseline, you get a green light. Your body is biologically primed. Go ahead and crush those high-intensity intervals or threshold sessions. If your HRV is slightly suppressed below normal, you get a yellow light. Proceed with caution, maintain moderate intensity, maybe stick to zone 3, or just focus on technique instead of raw output. And if your HRV is significantly below your baseline, that's a red light. This is a blaring siren of accumulated stress. You must prioritize recovery, stick exclusively to easy zone 1 or 2 work, or just rest entirely so you don't dig a deeper hole. The results of trusting your biology like this are genuinely staggering. Research actually shows that athletes using this dynamic HRV-guided framework achieve the exact same, or often better, fitness gains compared to athletes following traditional fixed plans. In specific clinical studies, runners who dynamically adjusted their load based on HRV significantly improved their 3,000 meter times and their VO2 max. But here is the craziest part. They achieved these gains while doing far fewer, grueling, high-intensity sessions. It proves that improving endurance isn't just about blindly accumulating volume. It's entirely about timing your stress to perfectly match your body's readiness to adapt to it. All right, wrapping things up with section 5, adjusting your training. Let's navigate the nuances and make sure you avoid those common pitfalls. Let's look at a few practical errors to avoid. First rule, never panic over a single bad reading. HRV works on trends. A sudden one-day drop could just be random noise, a weird sleep cycle, or a slightly different measurement angle. But a 2 to 3 day drop in a row, yeah, that is a definitive signal to back off. Also, you have to look at your life context. Did you have a few heavy drinks last night? Did you sleep terribly because of an impending work deadline? The tech doesn't know that context, but you do. Use your common sense. And as we said earlier, never compare your absolute score to your training partner's score. It's entirely relative to you. At the end of the day, remember that HRV doesn't completely replace your training plan or your intuition. It complements them. Think of it as your daily biological compass. You should always cross-reference your HRV with your resting heart rate. For example, if your HRV drops significantly and your resting heart rate spikes up at the exact same time, that is a very strong, undeniable indicator of deep fatigue or impending illness. Add in your sleep quality and your perceived soreness, and suddenly you have a completely bulletproof daily assessment. I really want you to adopt this mindset. A low HRV reading is an indicator, not a sentence. It's not a punishment, and it absolutely doesn't mean you're failing your training plan or losing your fitness. It is simply a highly accurate biological cue telling you what to do today so you can win tomorrow. Training with objective criteria means knowing exactly when to violently push your limits and exactly when to fiercely protect your physiology so you can absorb the gains and fight another day. So, now that you have this highly practical framework to train with true biological intention, I want you to think about your next step. What is the very first change you are going to make to your morning routine tomorrow to start capturing this data? It's time to establish your baseline, trust the scientific trends, and let your body guide your performance. Thanks so much for joining me for this explainer, and I'll catch you in the next one.